Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming, and it is a very honor to show our presentation to you today. Today we're going to talk about factors influencing the development of elite athletes. Our presentation style will be BBC News in the United Kingdom. The anchor, which is I, and 5 members of our team here today will play role of reporters. The content will include introduction, training, environmental and maturational factors, the role of coaching and instruction, parental influences, cultural factors, and conclusion. Please allow us to show our presentation. If you're ready, we would like to begin.
With the news now at midday on BBC One, Gavin Esler.
Today on BBC News, researchers interested in identifying the factors that influence on the development of elite athletes. These findings suggest that genes determine the size of the bucket, while the environment determines the contents. The purpose of this review is to examine numerous factors related to acquiring high levels of sports proficiency. It is perhaps not surprising that high levels of training or practice are required to attain expertise in sports field. And training factors has been emphasized among many other factors that influence on the development of sports proficiency. Ziwon reports, I've been notified that you have research on relationship between training and skill acquisition. Could you give us a detail about training factors?
Research on skill development clearly supports the relationship between training practice and skill acquisitions. In a study of expertise in chess, Simon and Chase indicated that difference between the expert level players and lesser skilled players were attributable to the ability to organize information in more meaningful chunks rather than possession of superior memory capacity. Based on this finding, the author suggests that inter-individual variation in performance could be explained by quantity and quality of training. Singer and Jenner summarized the characteristics that distinguish the expert as follows. Experts have greater task-specific knowledge. Experts interpret greater meaning from available information. Experts store and assess information more effectively. Experts can better detect and recognize structured patterns of play. Experts use situational probability data better. Experts make decisions that are more rapid and more appropriate. Moreover, previous research has identified general rules that outline the progression from novice to expert in a given domain. This includes the 10-year rule.
Could you explain about 10-year rule?
According to the 10-year rule, a 10-year rule commitment to high levels of training is the minimum requirement to reach the expert level. This rule has been shown in many sports, for example, in music, swimming, long-distance running, and tennis. According to Erickson research, this intensive exercise requires a high level of effort and concentration. Ironically, no immediate compensation should be sustained. Through these studies, experts develop skills for each discipline, with training requiring high effort and concentration.
Many thanks, Jiwon. We found that experts are made of greater quantity and quality of practice, and we also entitled as the 10-year rule, which it has identified as general rules of progression to be an expert in a sports domain. Research examining the effect of practice indicates that performance increases mechanically according to a power function. Tomo reports, what's the power law of practice, and could you explain with an example?
The power law of practice says that learning occurs at a rapid rate after the onset of practice, but that this rate of learning decreases over time as practice continues. An example of the power law of practice is presented in Figure 1, illustrating the data from a single subject in colors study on learning to read inverted text. In this study, participants were required to read up to 165 pages of inverted text. The data indicate that learning of this text follows a power function.
Would you suggest other evidence on the power law of practice?
Central to the theory of deliberate practice suggested by Erickson et al. Is the monotonic benefits assumption. According to this assumption and in concordance with the power law of practice, a monotonic relationship exists between the number of hours of deliberate practice performed and the performance level achieved. However, Erickson et al. Argued that it was not simply the accumulation of training hours that lead to superior levels of performance. Training quality was also important. Future experts create opportunities to prevent learning plateau and perpetuate adaptation to higher amounts of training stress by continually modifying task difficulty.
Accumulated hours of practice time between expert and amateur is a lot different. Could you tell us about the practice time?
Yes. Data from the Erickson et al. Study of expert musicians supports the relationship between number of hours of deliberate practice and level of performance. Specifically, they found that expert level musicians spend in excess of 25 hours per week in deliberate practice activities, whereas less successful musicians spend only 2 hours a week. Experts accumulated over 10,000 hours to deliberate practice by age 20, while amateurs accumulated about 2,000 hours at the same age.
So now we're talking about practice and performance in sports field, not in music field. What would you say?
I would say expert athletes accumulated more hours of training than non-experts in sports field. Moreover, not only do experts spend more time overall in practice, they also devote more time to participating in the specific activities deemed to be the most relevant to developing the essential component skills for expert performance. For example, Baker et al. Found that expert athletes from basketball, netball, and field hockey accumulated significantly more hours in video training, competition, organized team practices, and one-on-one coach instruction than non-expert athletes. In sum, differences between experts and non-experts on both quantity and quality of training are strongly supported in sport and other domains. Thank you.
Many thanks to Tom Ho. We also found that the new theory of training factor, which we entitle as the power law of practice, seems to be very interesting because the rate of learning decreases as practice continues over time. Let's talk to our colleague Jong-uk. Reports any other factors associated with the attainment of sport expertise.
The quantity and quality of trainings are important variables in understanding how one obtains the status expert in any field. There are significant environmental factors that also contribute to the development of exceptional performance.
Another factor which is associated with the attainment of sport expertise is maturation factors, as we entitled the relative age effect. Reporter Jong, can you please respond to the relation between age effect and the acquisition of sport expertise?
Another factor that appears to influence the acquisition of expertise is the relative age phenomenon. As in school, children are categorized by age to equalize evaluation and competition. However, due to the relative age effect, categorizing children by age can create training inequalities and reduce opportunities for younger children.
Is there any specific research that shows the relative age effect?
In the previous study, the children by ice hockey players were organized into leagues according to calendar year. According to this study, players born earlier in the year were more likely to participate in hockey at the top tier levels compared to players born during the later months of the year. Two main explanations have been offered to account for the relative age effect. Barnsley and colleagues hypothesized that older players were bigger, stronger, faster, and better coordinated than the younger players, so they were more successful in the hockey field. Second hypothesis proposed that older players were more likely to be selected to higher competitive representational teams, where they would receive improved coaching, facilities, and ice time when compared with their peers. This second hypothesis has clear implications for the development of elite athletes given the necessary resources in the attainment of expertise.
Could you conclude about the relative age effect on the attainment of sport expertise?
Research on the relative age effect suggests that the development of elite athletes is based in part on age differences and on equal access to training opportunities. Alternative methods of grouping children for competition and advancement in sport require examinations. Thank you.
Thanks again, Jungwook. Environmental and maturational factors does impact a lot on acquiring sport expertise. Environmental factors provide that genes are not only the matter of determining of sport proficiency. Quantity and quality of training are also important variables to acquire expert in the sports field. We can't miss the discussion about the role of coaching and instruction. Mindy reports, could you please tell us about the role of coaching and instruction?
Expert coaches are also experts on planning. Legendary UCLA basketball coach John Wooden always spent more than an hour preparing for each practice, so that players were always active, either engaged in drills or shooting free throws. No one was permitted to stand around watching.
I have an important question. At what age should athletes seek out expert coaching?
Previous studies proposed that in the early stages of development, athletes require primarily technical instruction with a high degree of support and praise to encourage continuing participation in the sport. They described an important part of the coach's role in the early years as being kind, cheerful, and caring. Only when athletes are older and more highly skilled would a coach require sophisticated knowledge and advanced qualifications.
Lastly, could you conclude your answer on the role of coaching and instruction?
Even though advanced coaching was necessary for the athlete in the later stages of development, coaches working with children needed enthusiasm and facilitation skills. Clearly, both the practice structure and the domain-specific knowledge of coaches are highly relevant to the progression and development of athletes in sport.
Thanks again, Media Reports.
Thanks.
Retrospective research with elite performers over the last 30 years has revealed the importance of parental support for the development of expertise. Bloom and colleagues interviewed talented performers and their families in the fields of sports and created a model of talent development with 3 stages. User reports, could you tell us about the details on those 3 stages and what phenomenon have occurred in the early year?
In the early years, parents were found to take a leadership role where they provided their child with the opportunity to participate and sought out their child's first formal teacher. For the child athlete, emphasis in these years was on having fun and enjoy learning the basic skills. The transition to the middle years was characterized by a greater commitment of both parents and the athletes. Parents were seeking for more accomplished teachers as for the child and devoted more time and resources. It was also during these years that child's talent often dominated the family's routine. During the later years, parental involvement decreased as the performer took greater control of the decision-making process. Yet, parents continued to provide support in a background role as a supportive and financial role.
That was clear statements of early, middle, and later year. Are there any other example of each of those stages?
Well, Cote's research was the example of these stages. During the sampling years, parents provided their child with the opportunity to sample a wide variety of sports. The specializing years saw parents as a facilitative role where they made financial and time commitments, supporting access to better coaches, facilities, and the training equipment. Finally, in the investment years, parents played strictly an advisory and supportive role. Parents provided emotional support, such as encouraging the recovery from the injuries, and this high level of emotional and financial support is the central characteristic of the investment years.
Parental support helps elite athletes deal with the demands to reach an expert level of performance. Could you conclude your statement on parental support?
The research of Bloom and Cote demonstrates how parental support is necessary to reach the expert level of performance. The two models demonstrate how the evolving role of parents from a leadership role to a general supportive role.
Thank you for your answer. We now understand the importance of parental influence. Then, what do you think about the cultural factors?
Cultural factors are a significant component of the environmental equation and development of the expertise. For instance, in Canada, ice hockey is exposed a lot in the media and players are treated as national heroes. The climate and facilities make people in Canada get involved in the ice hockey. In fact, Canada has 3.5 times more children playing ice hockey than Russia, Sweden, Finland, Czech Republic, and Slovakia combined. Given these factors, it seems that Canada has enjoyed success internationally in sports.
Moreover, Black Americans have come to dominate in almost every sport, such as basketball and track and field. Does this circumstance relate to the cultural factors?
The domination of Black on particular sports is the clear evidence of cultural factors giving influence to the sports. Black athletes have access to coaching, facilities, and competition in the public school. However, sports taught primarily in a country club setting, such as golf and tennis, provide a significant barrier to the entry for Blacks. The private clubs have historically denied the membership of a certain minority groups due to economic and social reasons. Thank you.
Many thanks to Yoonjin. Apart from numerous factors, Yoonjin reports highlighted that parental influences and cultural factors play important roles to attain sport expertise. Although there is a wealth of information regarding all the factors that influence the development of elite athletes, future research is also needed to address areas of limitation. This was BBC News, and have a good evening.